Hey there, I am back with another deck review, and today we're going to be looking at Midas from Thirdway Industries. Thirdway is one of my favorite designers out there, in large part because of the lore and mythology that he works into all of his decks. Designer Giovanni Meroni is a talented artist, but it's the stories that he weaves in that really draw me in more than anything. And for this one, he went back to classic Greek mythology with the story of King Midas and the Golden Touch. We'll talk a little bit about the story as we get into the cards themselves, but it's the story of a king who wished for everything he touched to turn to gold. And you'll definitely see gold worked throughout the entire design. Now, if you like the deck that you see here, this is a Patreon deck, meaning that it was released first to supporters on Patreon. Great subscription. I've been a member for a very long time. And if you like this and want to see more decks like it, other really unique designs, I'd recommend checking it out. I'll put a link down in the description so you can consider backing for yourself. But let's get into Midas. Now, it's the story of a king who wanted everything he touched to turn to gold, and the deck definitely fits, almost as if the tuck box and the cards themselves were touched by King Midas. You can see that right away with the gold stock that's used on this one. It's a shimmering gold stock, nice little flecks of metallic color throughout the entire tuck box, and then covered with gold foil. The gold on gold is almost too much, but thematically working with the deck, I think it's a great idea just to kind of work in the story. Really striking look to it overall. Classic Giovanni line work on this one. You can see the name of the deck, Midas, and then the image of King Midas there in the center. Very familiar styling for Giovanni with that line work. And then beautiful use of patterns all the way around, forming a series of borders working their way out. Beautiful look to the front of the tuck box. Love the over-the-top gold on this one. And then on the sides, get the name of the deck, Midas on one side and on the other. Some ad copy on the bottom. Notice this one mentions WJPCC, Wuzhang Playing Card Company. Usually, Giovanni prints most of his decks with USPCC, but has started exploring work with WJPCC, partly because they do smaller print runs, but as you'll see on this one, they do some fantastic work as well. Top here just has some more pattern work on it, a little bit covered up by that seal. And then the back has a preview of the back design of the cards, of course, done up in foil. I would have loved to have seen this tuck box with some embossing on it, but I will say that stamped foil does give a little bit of a texture to it, almost as if it was embossed very lightly. And then finishes out with the, of course, metallic gold tuck seal with the image of King Midas and the numbering out of the 1000 deck series. Opening it up, more gold foil with the Roman numerals for 2023 when the deck was created. And then the crowns on the inside symbolizing Midas's office. And then another closer look at some of that gold metallic finish on the tuck box. Beautiful color to the stock. Almost looks like it's painted on there, but you can see from the edge there, it is in fact a completely gold colored paper. Beautiful look to it overall. No foil in the interior of the tuck box, but you do get some nice shine and shimmer from the stock itself. But let's take a look at the cards, because the gold doesn't stop with the tuck box. And you may have noticed already, these are, of course, a gilded deck. Very fitting on this one. I love the kind of matte gold color on this one. I think it's a great finish overall. Not quite that mirror finish you see on some decks, but sometimes I like the change of pace. And for this one, I think the matte works really well. And then as you peek at both sides of the deck, you'll see it's foiled gold on both sides, a flood foil of gold to give you gold on gold on gold. Just color everywhere, and that shimmer and shine all over the deck. And speaking of the back design, here it is. So done in a mixture of almost all shining gold, and then the red color here and a little bit of black, just to give some accents of the design. Design made up of the sort of reflected image of King Midas there, and then the sort of patterns and borders all the way around, almost looking a little bit like stained glass going all the way out to the borders. It's a really ornate design, finishes out with that thin all gold border for a really striking design. Love the contrast, by the way, with the red on the gold. Talk a little bit more about how he achieved that contrast in a second. So really nice look to it overall. And the gold doesn't stop there because, of course, we've got gold on the faces as well. So let's dive right into the cards. Now, the majority of the story of the cards is told in the trio of jokers. And the first joker depicts the namesake of the deck. This is King Midas himself. And then the other key player of the story depicted on the second joker, this is the satyr Silenus, who was the foster father of Dionysus, the god of wine. So as the story went, Silenus was passing through Midas's kingdom one day and decided to take a little bit of a nap in the king's famed rose garden. When Midas found him, instead of growing angry at the satyr who was invading on his land, he instead brought the satyr into his palace and entertained him for several days. And when the king finally returned Silenus to his foster child Dionysus, the god was so thankful that he granted Midas anything that he may wish. And Midas was a particularly greedy king, and so he wished that everything he touched would turn to gold. Of course, the god kind of gave him a little bit of a warning, like, hey, are you sure that's what you want? But the king insisted, and so his wish was granted. And so, of course, Midas would grow to regret that decision. When he wished for everything to turn to gold, it was taken extremely literally, and so it was everything he wished. So he couldn't even eat or drink, because as soon as the food or the drink would touch his lips, it would turn to solid gold and he couldn't eat it anymore. So a little bit of a sad story, a story of greed, and beautifully illustrated on the two jokers. Of course, completely clad in gold. You get that shine all the way through, and a bit of an interesting technique at work on these. And so basically you'll see here a lot of the color here, very, very high contrast. How that's achieved is once the flood gold foil, so what happened is the sheet would have gold printed all the way across and then the ink applied on top. But usually that gives kind of a shinier look to the ink. Instead, on this one, he applied multiple layers of ink. So there's a solid white base layer, and you can see a little bit of it peeking through here, and then the color printed on top of that instead. What that allowed is that allowed the color to sit more on top of the gold, kind of gave it its own bit of contrast instead. So interesting technique, and he used here, you can see the white here as these two characters, because these are the two characters who were the only ones who couldn't themselves turn to gold. Of course, the satyr Silenus, because he was a god, didn't turn to gold, and Midas himself, while he turned everything around him to gold, he himself didn't turn to gold. But beautifully illustrated one-way jokers on these with the symbols at the top, and you can see Midas there kind of with the food and drink that had turned to gold in front of him, kind of looking a little bit frustrated there. And then, of course, the satyr, who was the adopted father of the god of wine, with the grapes and the glass of wine in his hands. And the third and final joker showcases the tragic ending to the tale. As Midas grew increasingly frustrated as he was turning all of his possessions into gold, it was said that he was approached by his own daughter and unwittingly touched her, turning her to gold. So you can see his young daughter there, all completely turned to gold with a little golden apple there. Really beautiful and striking card overall. Love the three jokers. I love when Giovanni does these one-way styles. I think they really stand out to me. But there's your jokers. And the Ace of Spades once again gives a tribute to Midas, almost like his face is there on a coin with Midas, and then the 2023 at the bottom there. And then just an accent of that bright purple color around the borders with a classic pip and index in the corner. Just a slightly stylized pip. So very nice. Love the kind of contrast in color he's able to get with the purple there. And as you go through the other three aces, other three a little bit more plain, kind of on that medallion in the center there, almost like a stained glass window with the smaller pip in the center, the red or the black for the red or black cards. And the black cards have that kind of purple accent as well. Number cards, all relatively straightforward. Obviously you get that flood gold foil, the purple frame in the center with a little bit of patterning, and then the fairly small pips in the middle there. Nothing too special on these, but nice functional cards if you wanted, if you for some reason wanted to use an opulent gold deck as your poker night deck. But the red cards go with the red border and the red pips, and then the black cards have the black pips with that purple or bluish purple border. So very nice look to these overall, and again, kind of in keeping with the shine and the gold all the way through. And then we get into the courts. Now, sometimes the courts feature an entire cast of characters, each one of them with a name and a backstory. Instead, on this one, Giovanni went with kind of more generic versions of courts. with their own kind of stories as they're members of Midas's courts, but each individual court doesn't have a name. Now, I will say, if you were a backer of the Damocles project, which is one that funded on Kickstarter not too long ago, you may recognize the artwork on this. This is modified artwork from the Damocles decks. I would have loved to have seen completely original artwork, but these have been sort of customized a little bit to kind of bring him into the story. And with the new tuck box, the new back design, and of course the new lore to go with it, I think it works still very well overall. The first three courts here, the spades, these represent some of the military leaders of the courts. So you'll see some of them with weapons in their hands. You'll have the shield there, or even the scars of battle here on the Jack of Spades. Beautifully drawn courts, definitely familiar territory for Giovanni with his line work style. And I really like the kind of stained glass background here done in that delicate blue lines overall. So very nice look to the court cards. And then as you go into the red courts, they have more red accents instead of the blue or the purple. And the hearts here represent passion and food, oddly enough. But some of the more passionate members of the courts, and you'll see all of them with bits of food or drink kind of floating around them. Obviously, this is a powerful one for Midas himself. It was his passion that kind of got him into this mess, and his desire for food that kind of taught him the error of his ways. So there's your hearts. And then the clubs represent some of the scribes and politicians of the court. I can see all of them there with the papers and the scrolls all around them. Beautifully illustrated again. And of course, all turned to gold through Midas's touch. And then finally are the diamonds, who represent some of the aristocracy, the wealthy of the land. So kind of meant to have kind of a more arrogant look. You get the coins and the jewelry all around them, little gems floating around. But there's your final three courts. Just so over the top with all the gold. Like I said, I think foil sometimes gets overused a little bit in decks, but in something like this where it fits into the theme so well, I think the more the merrier. I think, just adding in the gold box, the gold foil, the gold foil on the faces and the backs of the cards, and the gilding just really works well to me. Just a great deck overall. So love this design, love the theme, and love the just sort of over-the-top opulence of Midas. But anyway, that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed this little look at Midas from Thirdway Industries. Like I said up at the top, if you like what you see here, definitely go check out the Patreon for Thirdway. It's a great subscription. There's so many great ones out there, but that is one of my absolute go-tos. But anyway, that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe for more deck reviews, more unboxings. Let me know what else you want to see, and I'll see you for the next one.